colour expresses something in and itself. One can't do without it, one must make use of it. What looks beautiful, really beautiful, is also right. That's Vincent Van Gogh in a letter to his brother Theo, written in October 1885. Welcome to Stories in Colour, a podcast from the National Gallery in London, searching for histories of how colour as a technology and in art has changed the world we live in. Today, we're asking how we feel about colour, or more accurately, how colours make us feel, and whether that's the same for all of us. I'm Beks Leary from the Digital Department here at the National Gallery, and today I'm joined by Zeynep Sagir. Zeynep is an artist, colour consultant, and founder of the Colour Club. She holds a master's degree from Central St Martin's and spent 2 years researching colour psychology. Since graduating, she's gone on to become a certified colour consultant and colour therapist. And through the Colour Club, Zeynep runs workshops, hosts events, and offers consultancy, as well as publishing articles and interviews. Big welcome to Stories in Colour.
Hi.
It's great to have you with us. So we're talking about colour and emotion today.
Yeah.
And Van Gogh's, that opening quote that I read, mentions colour expressing something in and itself. What do we mean by emotion?
When we look at the paintings awaken the feelings, and they can hit us emotionally even before we understand fully why. Colors, shapes, textures, composition, they all work in harmony to evoke a powerful emotional response as well as the subject matter. And color is one of the most direct ways to express the feeling, because when we look at even before we notice the subject, the color already shaping how we feel, it communicates directly without words. And I think it's really good to know that also it's deeply personal. We are not just looking at the paintings. We are not just trying to read the artist's feelings. We are actually projecting our own feelings onto it. And I think without context, we are just bringing how we feel to what we see.
Yeah, completely. So when we think of emotion and colour, I guess colour generally rather than just in art, what are some of the emotions that might immediately come to mind for specific colours?
Colours have some symbolic meanings, like various meanings varying across cultures. And there are some common associations, like red is associated with fear, anger, danger. Yellow is linked to happiness, joy. Green represents healing, nature. Blue is linked to calm. But I think they are not necessarily universal. For example, white. In Western culture, white is linked to purity, innocence, while in Eastern culture, it's linked to mourning the death. And I think that culture plays a big role in shaping how we interpret color. Like, you may grow up in a culture where red is linked to celebration, but it also may trigger your anxiety, maybe stress, so it's so personal. So I think while culture offers us a kind of emotional codes, I think for colors, each person bring their own associations, expression. I think that's why color is so powerful. And I think color is a dialogue between the self and the world. And I think that's why it's so impressive.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about how colour and the emotion it might evoke with us is so culturally relative.
Yeah.
Are there any more examples of how that might be different, say, in the West and the East?
For example, in my culture, in Turkey, we have like a couple associations, like blue is linked to protection rather than calm. So, we have the object devil eye, and we believe that it protects us from the negativity. But
the evil eye protects from negativity.
Yes, so we believe that sometimes we are painting, the entrance wall like in blue, because we believe that is going to protect us from the negativity or negative like people. But it may not be like that for you or for your own culture. So it's really interesting to see different cultures have their own associations.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I was thinking about that film Inside Out, the Disney Pixar film. So for those who haven't seen it, it's a 2015 film about an 11-year-old girl called Riley, and she's moved to San Francisco, leaving behind her old life in Minnesota. And in the film, you get these like 5 core emotions, her 5 core emotions represented with different colours. And those are joy is yellow, anger is red, disgust is green, fear is purple, and sadness is blue. And I guess myself from like an English Western perspective, all of those except purple were quite obvious. I didn't think I associated fear and purple. I don't know if I really have a strong colour association with purple, but the others felt really like obvious. I guess anger and red, like because you kind of, I don't know, if you're getting really angry or like boiling over, your cheeks might flush red.
Yeah.
If you think about like the Mr. Man books, Mr. Angry is red. Yeah. So that feels like quite a common colour code.
Yeah. Red has some powerful emotional associations, like red is linked to danger, love, violence, fear. And for me, red is a color of extremes. And in the other cultures in China, red has been associated with joy, luck. In India, I think fertility. In South Africa, it's used for their morning rituals. In Western contexts, I mean, red is love, romantic, but also fear.
Yeah.
There is couple research that they analyze specific examples, like, for example, Athens Olympics 2004. And they found that athletes wearing red won more often than athletes wearing blue. And they suggested that reds may subconsciously signal dominance and aggression and potentially influence the other competitors and judge. So it's good to have that kind of examples. But for me personally, it makes me question, if I were a judge, it wouldn't affect how I judge the athletes maybe, because I don't think red is like extreme. For me, yes, but I don't think it's that effective on me personally.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because I heard about a study done on football teams. I think it was that if you were wearing a red shirt, it was associated with long-term success in English football. I'd be really interested to dig into that more.
Yeah.
So there are specific English football teams like Arsenal, Manchester United, Liverpool who wear red, and it would be so interesting to know like how much of that is like that those are just really good teams or have been, or has wearing a red shirt actually like really influenced their success.
Yeah, sometimes they think that, if you wear like red lipstick, you're going to be so attractive, that kind of assumptions. And personally, like when I was young, I was really believing that kind of thing, stereotypes, let's say, because I remember the day, I was trying red lipstick and I was feeling like I don't feel confident. I think it's so personal, and I try to realize what type of red, which tones of red suit me. And it's really important to discover yourself maybe. And I really believe that some people really feel the same when you read that kind of research and stereotypes. I really believe, but it may not work for everyone. I think it's good to maybe be aware of this. It's so personal.
So personal, and I guess there are so many variables as well. So my understanding is when people are doing research on connecting colour and emotion, you can either use colour terms, so like the categories, red, blue, green, or you can use colour swatches, so actually painted out or printed out little patches of specific colour. And as we know, like the two don't always completely correlate, do they? And language is so relative, definitely culturally, but even what you or I might think of as the kind of spectrum of red.
Yeah.
You know, the ends of that might be slightly different for each of us.
Yeah.
Maybe another one we might talk about is blue. So
Yeah.
I guess in English we have that metaphorical phrase, feeling blue, and you might associate blue with sorrow or sadness.
Yeah. We can look also artist experiences, like when we look at the Picasso's blue periods. And as we know that period was so heavy for him, and he chose to use blue to describe isolation, poverty, distance. And blue amplifies his feelings for him. And I don't think it's for everyone, but we know the context there. And I can really relate why he used that tone of blue. And it's really interesting because for me, blue is like really, it's like so protective for me.
Yeah.
And I don't feel calm when I see like blue. I feel like, I don't know, like, so I'm protected.
Empowered.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm protected.
It's really interesting to draw that contrast. So Picasso's blue period between 1900 and 1904 was like a series of works that he did predominantly in the colour blue, and they followed the death of a close friend of his called Carlos Casagemas in February 1901. And yeah, they were very like monochromatic works, weren't they? They actually, he typically used an iron-based pigment called Prussian blue through this period, which really characterised his palette. So like a very specific blue. He also was known to use ultramarine blue. But if you, the listener, want to, we have done an episode of the podcast on Prussian blue, so you can find out more about that pigment and its colour stories. The other thing I like, the fun fact about blue that I always see coming up is that it's like the world's favourite colour. It often ranks really highly in, if people rank what their most favourite colour is.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite global, that people really like the colour blue.
Yeah. I think it's like blue, green. I think people feel like obviously more connected with the nature maybe. And I personally really don't know why they feel like this, because I cannot really connect myself with that idea. Yeah. But I have many friends. They are like obsessed with blue, and they are telling me like we feel really peaceful. And also, obviously, they are Turkish. Like we love blue. But in terms of sadness, like that melancholy, when I look at Picasso's paintings, for example, I can feel the isolation. Because I didn't know the context before. And when I look at the old series, I felt the isolation maybe because he just used blue. Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
And maybe also from myself, from my own practice, when I choose to use just one color and its tones, obviously, I realize that I feel the same when I feel isolated. When I wanted to be alone, like maybe it's a period that I want to be distant from the world. And I realize that I'm also using just one color and its tones. Maybe that's why I understood him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I feel like this would be a good point for us to take a little break. So yeah, we've looked at how culturally relative colour is and some examples, blue, red. So after the break, we'll continue to think about how colour is subjective and then some ways in which that associates with psychology and therapy. So we've talked a little bit before the break about studies that were conducted looking at relationships between emotion and colour. But what is colour psychology?
When we ask what are the meanings of colors, the answer will be totally subjective. And where we came from, where we born, or background, culture, all these factors actually shaping the meaning of colors for us. And like Joseph Albers mentioned on his book, if one says red and 50 people listening, there will be 50 different reds in their minds. So color is a personal experience, and the way you feel about a specific color can be different from how I feel. And all these are actually related to color psychology. And it's so complex because it's so experimental. It's not like fixed science because our perception is unique. And color psychology is used to influence people's behavior. But also it's good to know that the color you choose for your project, for your product, may not work for other people. So color psychology actually help us to be aware of all these possibilities. It's really good to look all these examples, research studies. It makes you aware that our perception is completely different.
And is it quite an early science? Presumably people haven't been researching colour psychology for that long.
Especially today, it's so popular. Colour is so popular and they are like interested in. And I think people now started to realize that, that associations, yes, they are exist and definitely they are there for a reason. But people, I think, realize that stereotypes may not work for them. It's really important. For example, as a color consultant during my consultancies, I'm really trying not to suggest any color before understanding where they are coming from or analyzing their personalities, because I really believe that if I really suggest like random colors, you need to bring red, you need to bring blue into your house because of that reason, this reason, I know that they may feel not right in their space. And that's why I'm trying to analyze their personalities. We are having a long chat about colors. Then I can create their own personal color palettes and we can create a space they want. And when we look at the space we created together, we feel so like proud because spaces look so characteristic, personal, and it makes the other people think like, why the ceiling is yellow? Like, why not?
And why not have a yellow ceiling? Love that.
That kind of thing is really like fun to see because there are many people searching, and they are like, I want to use reds for my product because I want people to feel hungry. But it may not work for your own audience. It's really good to know your audience, what you want to do, your product, your feelings, what you want to show. And also it's good to always remember, even if you choose like blue, purple for your own product, by the idea that you're going to influence people in some way, it may not work. Yeah. So color psychology actually help us to feel like being more aware of that kind of factors that we can face with.
What kind of things do people come to you for colour consultancy? Is it normally for like interior design in their homes?
Yes, or sometimes artists like trying to do, obviously, animations is so popular and they need to create a specific colour palettes for their animations. And it can be so like difficult because when you watch that, animations like films, you can realize that they all have their unique color palettes. So sometimes they don't know because they are searching from the internet or books, but it's really like difficult to find what you want to show with that character. So I'm actually showing them how to analyze their feelings by using color. Or sometimes people for interior design, they are asking help because they really believe that I wanna use red into my bedroom because red brings love. And yes, it can be correct, but it may not work. So I'm actually trying to do that little, I'm showing them cards and we talk about the feelings and we talk about all these like colorful cards, and then we decide which color we want to use. And it's so interesting that they are realizing, actually, I don't like reds. I don't want to use red, or I don't feel comfortable around purple. But I thought that purple brings money, that kind of things. And yeah, it's really helpful, I think, having a color consultancy to be aware of what you feel about colors.
And bringing that to your own consciousness. Yeah. Are there specific colours or like specific examples of where you've seen colour used in a really specific way in advertising or products?
Yeah, what I observe, we can see green on the health products, and which makes sense because you may think that green is linked to nature. Also, if we talk about green, according to research that I read, we see the green super clearly, and our eyes are super sensitive to green more than any other color. And researchers think that it goes all the way back to our ancestors lived in the forest. To be able to spot different shades of green may help them to survive, and like which plants are safe, which plants are poisonous. And also green is a color of life.
Yeah, because it's the colour of trees, yes, it's the colour of plants, it's the colour of chlorophyll, I guess, within those. So
yeah, chlorophyll, like what makes the plants green. So it makes sense to see green at hospitals and on health products, because probably people feel safer and maybe it reduces their anxiety, stress levels. And I realized that, especially in London, I'm seeing lots of products like using like red shapes, like, circles, triangles. I was wondering why, because it reminds me poison, and it makes me like not to buy that product. I don't know, somehow it doesn't work for me. I feel like, okay, it's maybe kills the bacteria, but maybe it's something poisons that I shouldn't touch. It's maybe not so natural.
Like Dettol, I guess, would be an example, or other brands are available. Other like antibacterial products that are meant to be really clean, and they use a lot of green in their branding. But you'd associate that more with poison.
Yes, and I'm like, if I touch that product, is my skin gonna be hurt? Like that kind of, but it's my personal experience. Some people like feel super safe, but I can understand why.
You'd feel, that association with nature and green as this kind of calming experience. Yes. I guess we see that a lot in landscape painting in our collection of paintings at the National Gallery. So let's have a look at one, actually. We've got a very famous British painter, John Constable, who painted the Cornfield in 1826. And this painting, it does feel very calm. You've got a country lane lined with mature green trees on either side of it, and a sandy brown path slopes down towards the right before curving back to an open farm gate. And the gate leads on to this sloping field of wheat, and then more green fields beyond it. And then in the background, you've got lots of very characteristically comfortable, fluffy clouds in kind of whites and greys, but the blue sky behind them. And then at the far edge of the field, there's a wide river flowing through a water meadow. You can see a church in the distance, red-roofed houses nestled amongst more green trees. And in the foreground, there's a very sweet little black and white sheepdog who's herding who's herding a flock of sheep along the path. And there's a boy also who's dressed in a white shirt, and he's lying flat on the grass, looking down to a pool of blue water underneath him. It's a very classic English pastoral scene. And I guess the green tones that are really present in it are accurate to nature, but this painting does make me feel very calm when I look at it, very tranquil. And I think that is the kind of the green and the nature and the peacefulness of the scene. Yeah.
That's really
How do
amazing
you react
painting.
to it?
It's so interesting when I look at the landscape paintings like this. Blue takes my attention first, and I think blue means nature for me more than green. Personally.
That's really interesting. So the blue of a bright sunny sky.
Yes, to see
or
makes me feel
blue of the sea when it's, I guess. Yeah. Obviously, the sea is not always blue. But
I think that's why always when I look at the paintings, if I see like blue sky, clouds, I feel like calm.
So
and then
this
I'm
painting,
looking at yes,
you might feel calm as well, but for different reasons.
Yes.
Then
Because it's landscape painting, and obviously then I'm starting to look at the trees like greens, but I don't know why, but blue takes my attention a lot. Maybe now, obviously, we live in London and it's always rainy, and I really feel like I want to see like blue sky. That's why, I don't know.
I feel like that's probably quite a common experience for us Londoners.
In the other paintings as well, when I look at the other artists' paintings, it was super like interesting for me to see the sky. Sometimes obviously it's dark, light, and it makes me question that why they wanted to paint the sunsets. I was always like interested in looking at the sky when I was studying art. And even now, when the first thing I look at is like that sky.
The bright blue sky with the clouds in front.
And then the dog.
Yeah. We've talked a bit about different associations with blue, and it's lovely that you have such a positive association with it. And as we said, it being perhaps the world's favourite colour is maybe connected to that. But one other example of an artist who used blue very dynamically, I feel, was Derek Jarman, whose final film Blue was just a monochromatic bright blue screen of international climb blue, so very, very, very saturated bright blue. The voiceover has this political call to action and meditation on illness, so specifically AIDS and the AIDS crisis, on dying, on love, and the soundtrack is voiced by Jarman and some of his long-term collaborators who describe his life and his vision. And I do think it's so interesting thinking about how he's used blue very, very poignantly in that film to evoke emotion, and perhaps what we have both talked about as our kind of relationship with blue might be kind of accurate to that, in the sense that there's a sense of calm and peace, but also this like intense sorrow that we might get from that English phrase, feeling blue. And yeah, that sense of sorrow and grief all connected there. But this is probably a good point for us to take another little break. And after the break, we will come back to think more about how colour psychology might affect what we do with colour therapy, what colour therapy is, and we'll have, I think, a little bit more about how some other artists have linked emotion and colour. Welcome back from the break. So, as I said before, we are going to talk a little bit more now about how colour psychology might relate to colour therapy or chromotherapy. Could you tell us a bit about that and your experience of it?
So colour therapy, chromotherapy, is an alternative healing practice to influence humans' energy, mood, well-being, and it's based on the idea that each colour has their own energies that affects us physically and psychologically. And it's relatively a new concept for my own practice, because I have been exploring it professionally since January, and I think it's not something you can just study. You need to practice more. And I think I have a way long to go to even able to find my own techniques, because it's kind of spiritual as well. And we all have, different bodies' immune system, and our bodies react totally differently. So it's like something you need to work with people for a long time. And also it makes me realize that it's so impressive. Like different colors bring different energies to you, completely different. And if you have any like psychological problem, like anxiety, depression, actually colors can help you. And obviously it's kind of related to art therapy, but it's a little bit different because you are using lights. And, if you feel like any pain on your body, it's like trying to heal that part by using colorful lights. So it's actually sounds super spiritual as well. Yeah. But it's good to know that perspective that, again, color is so personal. It's like, individual experience, let's say.
And we should probably say neither of us are medically trained. Yes. So the content of this episode is definitely not medical advice. It's really interesting that, there is this spiritual practice of trying to find the healing energy in specific colours that might relate very individually to each person. So that's really exciting that you're exploring that more.
Also, it's good to really mention that it's not something like, if you do this, you're going to heal. It's not like medical advice. It's like really meditating. It's like personal experience. If you want to experience this, it's an alternative healing practice. But also, I also believe that it may not work, but it's good to know if you are interested in that process. It can be fun to experience this.
Yeah.
Like I actually looking to color therapy from a really fun perspective. It's really fun. I'm not like, I'm not a doctor.
This spiritual way of thinking about color has been quite common amongst very famous artists, including probably most famously because his book was called Concerning the Spiritual in Art, Vasily Kandinsky, who was a Russian-born artist and one of the pioneers of pure abstraction in modern painting in the 20th century. So he wrote that book, Concerning the Spiritual in Art, in 1911. And it was based on this idea that colour has an inherent emotional or spiritual quality, and that each colour might evoke specific responses based on its unique qualities. Do you resonate a lot with Kandinsky and how he writes, or I feel that he's quite prescriptive with how he feels about certain colours.
When I look at his paintings, actually what I understand is colour is like music for him. It's something playful. It's something can change your mood. And it makes me feel that I can feel that dynamism when I look at the paintings.
Yeah.
And I feel that so many colors going on, so many textures, brush strokes, actually so dynamic. And every time when I look at the same painting, I'm finding myself feeling completely different than before. I think it's like music. Like obviously we listen same music again and again, and every day we actually feel different about the same music. And his painting reminds me of that feeling.
I think his work is quite remarkable and, as we've said, pioneering at the time in the way that he felt that emotions could be expressed in art. Art didn't need to be representative, didn't need to represent the real world, but the way that he painted colours and lines and how those were arranged in the painting linked to kind of musical tones could have a really powerful spiritual impact. I like his colour associations, actually. I'll say a few because I think they have some difference to, I don't know, if we reference back to the Inside Out film, some of them are quite different. So blue he thought of as cool, heavenly, restful. I guess that is quite typical in the West. Red, very powerful, strong. Interestingly, he associated it with the masculine. And then yellow he saw as warm. I guess that makes a lot of sense. We associate yellow with sunshine.
Yeah.
But he also saw yellow as having a very disturbing influence and a very aggressive character. And I find that really interesting because, normally we think of Little Miss Sunshine, yellow, happiness, joy. And he saw it actually as being quite a interloper, or an aggressively characterized colour. I think that's really interesting. Another artist that very famously has linked emotion and colour very strongly is, of course, Vincent Van Gogh. So he often discussed painting and feeling in his letters to his brother Theo, and the idea of painting what you feel and feeling what you paint. And we, of course, have quite a few Van Goghs in the National Gallery, but one we might look at now is Van Gogh's chair, painted in 1888. And I'll describe it for those of you listening. So we see a very simple, empty chair placed on a terracotta tiled floor. It's straight backed with no armrests, made of plain, unpolished wood. It's painted yellow and has a rush seat. So it's made from kind of natural fibres that have been woven together into the chair's frame. And the chair itself is centred. It takes up most of the kind of frame of the painting and appears, though quite sturdy, also quite crudely made. There's a sense of, I don't know, maybe unbalance to it, or that some of the lines of it are not quite properly aligned. And placed upon the seat of the chair is Van Gogh's pipe and an open pouch of tobacco. The paper around the tobacco is quite a bright white. It's quite a focal point in the painting. Behind the chair on the floor, there's a low box signed Vincent, and it's got some sprouting bulbs in it that might be onions. And then behind the chair, there's part of a blue door, and the wall is also a sort of lightish blue. The reason we're looking at this painting is that it's been seen for a long time really as a kind of self-portrait, an almost surrogate portrait of himself. So he saw empty chairs, and he did one of Gauguin as well, as kind of representing the person who would have sat in it. And I wonder what you feel about the colours in this painting and how that might relate to Van Gogh and his emotions.
So as we know, Wong Go used colours to express his emotional state. And actually, when we look at his paintings, we know the context from the letters he wrote to his brothers. And I think this is a perfect example. And when we look at this painting, he used warm colors, ochre, terracotta, to not depict the object, but to symbolize the humility and loneliness. And I think it's one of the best examples to show how he used color to express his really emotional situation. And I don't know, it's something about the painting. Obviously, the chair makes me feel more deeply that he feels so alone. And from the other paintings also, we know that he used warm colors a lot to express his feelings. But what I can feel is really, because we know the context, and I can understand why he used that tone, because I think yellow was one of the key colors for him to use. Definitely. To express himself, describe himself.
Yes.
And when we all know from the letters, he always felt like isolated, lonely. And when I look at this painting, I'm not seeing the chair. I can feel the emotion.
His emotional state.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we asked our audience what artists or paintings came to mind in response to the word colourful. And Van Gogh was one of the artists that came up quite a lot, actually. Yeah. But another artist that lots of you mentioned was Mark Rothko. So he was an abstract expressionist artist working in the mid-1900s who paints these bold fields of colour fields, to create paintings which are very emotionally charged. An American painter. And he became increasingly experimental, working with colour and abstraction at the end of the 1940s. And this sort of signature style of his emerged, where he'd have a couple of rectangles of colour set against a background, and often the colours are so close that you have to really work hard to see to see and distinguish between them. And that really was about emotion for him, wasn't it? He wanted you as the viewer in front of his paintings to have a really emotional and visceral experience. If you stand in front of if you are standing in front of a Rothko, are there particular ones that come to mind that evoke something emotional for you?
So first of all, I want to say that I love Mark Rothko's paintings. He is really one of my favorite artists. And I really like that for abstract expressionist artists, color was the main character. And when I look at his paintings personally, what I feel, they look so stable and also hypnotic. And obviously some of them like so bright, some of them dark. But when I look at the paintings, maybe it's about color saturation. Something pulls me into the canvas. And some paintings makes me feel like they are meditative. But some of them, when I look at them for so long, they are super overwhelming. And I really like that. It's not about form there. It's about the color itself. Even when you look at the titles of his most of paintings, it's just like the colors. And it really makes me feel that what I feel is super personal. And I really like, that's the other thing. I love talking about his paintings because whoever I talk about his paintings, the feelings are completely different. Some people think that, I feel so calm. It's so meditative. And I'm looking at the paintings they are talking about. It's super overwhelming and it's super dark for me. Something bothers me. And I really like it.
And he has this kind of spiritual connection to colour as well, doesn't he? I think we're coming to the end of the episode, but I'll leave our listeners with this quote from Rothko. He said, "The people who weep before my pictures are having the same religious experience I had when I painted them." I love that. So yeah, that does bring us to the end of today's episode of Stories in Colour on emotion and colour. And we would love to hear what you think of the podcast. If you could take 5 minutes just to fill out our short survey, it will help us to make future episodes even better. You can find it on our website at nationalgallery.org.uk/podcast. And it's linked below in the show notes if you just want to click there. And if you've got more questions or thoughts that you want to share with us about the story of colour and how this amazing technology has interacted with human history, you can email us. We're on podcast@nationalgallery.org.uk, or you can send us in questions via our National Gallery social media channels. Just mention the podcast. And we will try our very best to answer some of those questions for you in a future episode of the podcast. So thank you ever so much for joining us for today's episode, with massive thanks to our wonderful guest, Zeynep Sagir.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And I've been your host, Beks Leary. Our producer was Harry Rosehill. Our researcher was Hannah Rogers. Our technicians were Ian Warren and Timothy Carpenter. Our video editor was Jan Kenyon. And with thanks to our scientific team here at the National Gallery. And thank you to you. Thanks for listening.